The TSW Roundtable is a proud member of the Star Wars Commonwealth Podcast Network. Go to swcommonwealth.com and take your first steps into a larger world.
Hello there.
You want the bad news?
Roger, roger.
The Force. It's calling to you.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Now you will experience the full power of the dark side.
That's not how the Force works.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
This is madness.
Let the past die. Kill it.
It's a trap! Fulfill your destiny. No!
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the TSW Roundtable. Once again, I am your moderator, Robert Cast, and today we are continuing our Star Wars movie retrospective series. And today, the next one up, and yes, it counts, 2008, The Clone Wars movie. So we've already taken care of the OT, and we've already taken care of the prequels, and we're running right up. So here we are. Before we get into the sequel saga, we got this little... well, what are we going to call this? A hidden gem, or well, we'll figure that out on the podcast here. So here we are with the Clone Wars movie retrospective, and joining me, my co-host this evening from my good buddy from San Diego, from the San Diego Sabers, is Steve Kirk. Say hi, Steve.
Hello there.
Welcome to the show. This isn't your first time on a roundtable, is it?
No, it's not. It's probably been about a year, but I am glad to be back as always.
Well, we appreciate you being here, and we have I think we have a dinner or drink or maybe even a party date coming up here at 2019 celebration.
Oh, we have plans within plans.
There we go. So I know this is going out before we go head off the celebration, but we got other stuff planned there. But yes, there's going to be just before we start, there going to be a bunch of us from the Star Wars Commonwealth Podcast Network down there at celebration. I think I'm going to might put together another roundtable, just with people going so we can get geared up and talk about panels and what we got planned and listener meetups and all that other good stuff. So it is going to be a good time. So stay tuned for that. But no, we're not done. We got to talk about the Clone Wars today. And unfortunately, Steve and I aren't alone. We have another couple of gentlemen joining us today. I'm going to throw it over to Matt Salvatore, good buddy of mine. Welcome.
Ahoy, ahoy. How's it going, guys?
Very good. Huge supporter of the Commonwealth. And always welcome on the roundtable. And here's another guy.
Thank you.
I remember hearing a podcast, I think, just a little off topic. You were joining, I think, Mark Godsiff, who used to be with Talk Star Wars, and you guys are waxing poetic about Batman v Superman.
Oh, yes. My favorite comic book movie. Yes, it's fantastic. It was a privilege to podcast with the Grand Admiral. Yes. Mark is an awesome guy, man. I love podcasting with the dude. He's fantastic. He
is. And if you haven't heard already, we'll try to set up a link or look for it. You will, if you are not a fan of that movie, you will have a brand new appreciation once you hear Matt just go on and on about it. And it's more than a love affair, I'd say. I think it's your thoughts are precise and it's perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
It's really awesome. But we'd be remiss if we didn't have another Canadian on the podcast. Well, almost Canadian. From Newfoundland, Nathan Roberts. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello, my little punky muffins.
Punky muffins.
Oh, my.
So we're recording, this is Groundhog Day, 2nd of February. Nathan, how cold is it out in Newfoundland?
It's got to be -10 now. It's pretty cold. We've hit a cold snap the last few days. Yeah, Celsius.
For Americans, that's Celsius. Everybody else around the world, you guys know what I'm talking about.
No, for Americans, that's simply cold.
That's just cold. Yeah, just a nope. All right, now we have the introductions out of the way. Let's start talking about this movie, The Clone Wars. I'm going to throw it back to Nathan. 2008. How'd you see this? Did you see this in a theater? What was going on at that time?
No, I didn't see it in the theater. I didn't see any Clone Wars until probably till it hit Netflix, whenever that was. So probably what's that, 2013, 2014?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now, I'd seen episodes here and there, but I hadn't seen the entire series, and I don't think I'd seen the movie before then. So, relatively new to it all.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere, and we're going to talk about this more. That the Clone, when it came out, we were expecting Star Wars to be pretty much just wrapped up. George Lucas on vacation or semi-retirement, whatever he was doing, and then all of a sudden we get this animated movie coming to theater. So it kind of it blindsided me because I think I wasn't really tuned into what was going on the message.
I don't think anybody was. That's the story of this movie.
Yeah, exactly. But it did. Hey, it made money. Made what 68 million or something domestically.
Nice.
Yeah, and it only cost 8.5 to make or something. So yeah, it did well. Like if you're looking at raw numbers. So, Matt, where were you in 2008?
Okay, let's see. I actually saw this movie in the theaters. I was 12 years old when I saw this movie, so I was like target audience for this. I remember thinking when I was watching the movie, I'm like, I can't wait until they make Legos for all this stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, I guess you would have been. I got the monitor in front of me and I just saw Steve. He kind of put his head down a little bit when you mentioned you were 12 years old in 2008, and I can very much relate. So, Steve, 2008, where were you? You don't have to say how old you were, but where?
So I was working as an adult.
I hope so, yes.
As an adult.
I missed it when it hit the theaters. The prequels were done. We were in another dark age of Star Wars times, and somehow just never got on my radar at the time. It wasn't, much like Nathan. It wasn't until years later. I think it was probably after I saw some or most of the TV series that I went back to see it, realizing, wait, I've always kind of considered it the pilot.
Right.
And I was like, oh, no, there's a pilot I haven't seen. Oh, let me go check this out. So kind of had a different viewing experience when you know all the characters already.
Yes. Yeah. Especially there's a few reveals we're going to get to in a little bit. Yes. For the same thing for me, 2008, I think I snuck out and saw it. And again, I don't know how old I was, but anyway, I was again, adult job and family and whatever going on. So, and it was one of those, I think I was working out of town. I was like, oh, you got a night to yourself. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm going to sneak off and see it's Star Wars. So I'm sure I'm going to like it. And again, this is where, yes, we had Family Guy and The Simpsons on TV, but as far as theatrical animated movies, they still, much like a lot of the Disney stuff, it had a lot of inside jokes for the parents to giggle at, but they weren't targeted for adults. So this is one of those ones where it was they're dipping their toe into, yeah, maybe we can get a broader audience with this movie. So here we are. This is the Clone Wars. This is basically, and I think Steve, you said it best. This is like not the hidden pilot, but this is the pilot. Because it's almost like two separate episodes, big episodes.
But much in the way that the series was developed, where they do an arc over several episodes, and this was kind of just one of those rolled into an hour and a half movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
Yeah,
so.
I think the same thing. Nathan, first, let's. How about we go with the obvious one? Let's get it out of the way. Ahsoka Tano introduced into this movie. Just for me personally, right off the bat, I know everybody kind of cringed when she came on or had a really bad, ooh, what's this? Ooh, snips. Oh, wow, how come we didn't hear about this person?
Guy.
Yeah, this is going to be annoying. But again, now one of the most beloved Star Wars characters in entire all of Star Wars. So, Nathan, Ahsoka Tano, what do you think of this introduction?
Yeah, she's not great in this. I love Ahsoka, and I love her in like you said, later in the series is great. I mean, it kind of flows into the opinion I have of this movie is that, like you guys were saying, this is basically 4 episodes thrown together to make a movie, stitched together at the seams. The animation quality, they put a bit more money and effort into it. But I think it would have been better if they had taken something like the Night Sisters arc later on, a few years later, and made the movie about that. Something that, when it was more polished. And I mean, I'm not sure, but I feel like the reason that they chose this arc was because, I mean, we all know how the Clone Wars was released out of order as they were able to produce it.
Right.
I have a feeling that this was the only arc where they had all 4 episodes ready to go at the beginning. And that was why they chose it, because it's not, I don't know, it's just not a great arc for a movie.
Yeah, and I think also too, I think what you're getting at, I think when I saw it, I was just happy to have it because it was Star Wars, but I didn't know it was coming. Now, in comparison, yes, it suffers from them not quite finding their footing and everything else with the rest of the series. And of course, there's way better arcs to follow. I mean, so I understand what you're saying there, but like when it's maybe it's almost better it was the first thing we got, because it's not like, oh, we had that other, the Sons of Dathomir and this and that, and all this, like, it's like, what? Now we get this?
True.
Well, it also had very familiar portions of the Star Wars universe. I mean, it had Tatooine, it had Jabba, it had, people were like, oh, that's familiar. I mean, if you put the Night Sisters on there, no one's gonna know
that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So, Matt, what do you think? Ahsoka, like, this is her debut, and this character again, huge arc, and what even her leaving the Jedi Order eventually, like, when you're talking about introduction to where it ends up, and even now after Rebels, like, holy crap, this is something else.
Right. I have to agree with Nathan. She's not great in this movie. As the character progresses throughout the Clone Wars, she gets, I think with each season she gets better. For me, she's not like, my favorite character. For me, she's like, meh. But like, I think she's a great character now, especially after all the development that they've put into her. But yeah, I agree with Nathan. And here she's she made, even at 12 years old, I was like, what?
You didn't like Fly Guy?
No. We'll get into the humor.
Yeah, I guess so. Steve, here's this huge character. What are you thinking?
So it's interesting. I was talking to somebody, it might have been last night, about the development of Ahsoka. And one of the things that I think Filoni has proven over time is that he knows how to play the long game. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's clearly this character development where, she starts out, quote unquote, snippy and a little irreverent and disrespectful, and she's trying to prove herself, and develops into, as we've said, one of the most beloved Star Wars characters of all time now. I wonder how much of that was simply, oh, wait, we've got another couple episodes, let's see what we want to do with her now, versus I have a plan.
Yeah, that would be interesting to know. Like, if he had the general arc later, and you know what? I'm gonna have to say, yeah. I think, I don't know for sure, but hearing from Filoni, being really disappointed about not being able to finish the Clone Wars, I think you might be onto something there, Steve. Because
Filoni's a genius.
He really is.
As far as overall arcs, you might be onto something. Like, he must have. There's something else.
Yeah, he may not have sketched it out, to the nth degree of detail, but I suspect he knew the flow of how he wanted to develop her over time. He had the plan for the whole series. That just would not surprise me as being part of it.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he had a basic idea, but I mean, what her fate would end up being was really up in the air for a while, because he and Lucas would argue back and forth about whether she survived the series or not, right? Whether she survived past Revenge of the Sith. So he may have had that thought, but whether it would have happened, I mean, it could have gone either way, really.
Well, and again, with this one character, while we're on her, it was dealt with. I think they had a great handle on it, because they had to deal with the fact she wasn't in Revenge of the Sith. And that's what everybody said. Oh, they're going to kill Ahsoka. They're going to kill Ahsoka. And that's why when they eventually killed her off, I know we're veering a little bit off the movie, but it's kind of hard not to when it's literally part of a whole package. So, I think from the get-go, I think you guys are right. Like, they must have had some sort of arc, because they knew they had to deal with her eventually. I mean, and instead of killing her, what a better way? Have her actually leave the Order. And especially when
yeah.
when we're talking about this movie and how she was introduced and how eager and the young Padawan and even her look is different. It's that big-eyed, wide-eyed, kid that just wants to please. It's
But I'll say this: she's so bad in this movie that she put off Obi-Wan from ever getting another Padawan. He had like 2-3 years. He could have took on another apprentice, and he never did.
Yeah, no. Awesome. Okay, well, Nathan, while you're on the roll there, Matt brought this up earlier. The humor in this movie. This is a different. I know we have. I got a bad feeling about this. There's the jokes, the general Star Wars jokes. But what are you thinking about? Fly Guy and Snippy and Stinky and.
Oh, that stuff's horrible. Where it gets good is the and this goes through the whole series, but the Obi-Wan adventurous banter.
Yes.
You got like a real Mr. and Mrs. Smith thing going on, right? My favorite quote of Obi-Wan's in this is, "You'll have to do better than that, my darling." It's like, oh, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, what do you think? You want to touch on this? The humor of this movie, like, is it?
Okay, yeah, I'm a DC guy, so I'm a no jokes guy. But I think the funny thing about this movie is that there's a part of the movie where it's extremely serious and clones are dropping like flies, and then you cut over and you have Anakin and Ahsoka making a game of it.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there watching it, and I'm like, okay, these clones are like in a gritty movie, and they're getting blown to pieces, and like it's pretty serious.
Yeah.
I mean, like, one clone comes up, hits the droid with his gun, and then he gets shot, and it's pretty brutal. And then you have over, and they're kind of like making a game out of it. And for me, that kind of just that juxtaposition of a seriousness and then them joking about it never really worked. And for me, the Obi-Wan Ventress fight, though I enjoy some of it, I think a lot of the talking was just too much. I think they talked a little too much in that fight, and I think it could have been cut. But I mean, I understand why the humor was there, but like, even as a 12-year-old kid, I'm like, nah, it's not for me.
I think some of that was Filoni probably going for the Gimli and Legolas dynamic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He's a big Lord of the Rings fan, so
Yeah,
that's
I
true.
can see that. Steve, now you're probably like myself, a little bit more seasoned going into this. What do you think? Is it just is the humor playing to a younger audience, or is it just sometimes it misses, or is it just something like that?
Well, it's probably all of the above, to be honest. It's a way for Filoni to lighten the mood, and it's a cartoon, and so you're aiming it towards a younger demographic, so you can be kind of cheesy, kind of over the top-ish, and appeal to that demographic. But at the same time, the humor, the playful banter between Ventress and Obi-Wan has just become famous over time.
Yes.
They're constantly flirting with each other. And even, the kind of the lame jokes that Ahsoka makes, she's a young Padawan, and she's overly anxious to try and prove herself being worthy and being old enough. So some of that you can kind of say, well, it's a nervous behavior making these bad jokes, and you can try it. I'm trying to excuse it, apologize it, explain it. One way or the other, it kind of works for me, but there again, I have kind of the reverse perspective of I saw the series, so I was used to it.
Yes. Well, also to touch on what you were saying with Ahsoka saying, like trying to fit in and that awkwardness, and considering the age of Ahsoka in this movie, it's the same thing I remember doing when we did the Attack of the Clones retrospective, and thinking about Anakin and how cringy his dialogue is. But I had to add, if we all had a tape recorder from when we were 16 and 17 talking to whoever it was that stole our heart in high school, the dialogue coming out of our mouths would have been just as cringeworthy, I am quite sure.
Oh, there's nothing worse than a 14-year-old trying to
or bringing up sand.
Or sand, it gets everywhere. So yeah, exactly. I think you're right, Steve. Her humor anyway is very age appropriate to the character. Like,
right.
It makes sense in that. I never thought of it that way. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, of course. Like, she's 14. She'll be making stupid jokes.
Yeah.
I love the part where she is joking with the clones about how she saved Anakin, though. I found that to be like really touching. Like where she's like saving the general, and then they all start laughing like that. That made so much sense. That was perfect.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's roll over Dooku. We have Dooku and Anakin kind of meeting up, and
Christopher Lee Dooku.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So, Nathan, what do you think of this, dude? Like, we've seen him, but now we're getting a better, like, almost these characters we had in the movie. Now we knew Anakin, Obi-Wan, we knew a lot of them, Padme, but now we got this Dooku guy that came in and out once in a while, and here he is. Like, what are you thinking about, especially with him, the saber fights and all that other stuff?
I don't think that there's much more here. I don't think we get much more here from him than we do in his short appearances in both movies. I mean, he develops a little bit, especially his relationship with Sidious through the series, but just his appearance in this movie doesn't really do anything for the character.
Were you surprised that they just kind of ripped off the Band-Aid about, with Anakin, with his, your powers have doubled since the last time we met? And we thought in Revenge of the Sith, we thought they were talking about their meetup in Attack of the Clones, but no, clearly they met up in between.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, how many of those things are there in Star Wars where we just have to, come up with a justification for it in your head, right? Like, I mean, it's just another one of those things. I don't think it bothered me the first time I really thought about it, but it definitely doesn't bother me now.
Well, it's almost like, especially later on in the series, when we think about Anakin, we knew that he couldn't really meet up with Grievous because of the dialogue in Revenge of the Sith. So you're immediately handcuffed. But I think with them saying, "Oh, your powers of Dooku," saying, "Oh, your powers is double," like they literally went in this movie, ripped that Band-Aid off. Okay, now you can deal with it. Now they can have all the wonderful. It's out of the way. It's done.
Yeah, it's one line in one movie.
Yes.
Said offhand. In banter between two characters.
Star Wars, and
I know.
I'm not going to speak for entire fandom,
but Rob, counterpoint.
Yes.
It's Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah, you're completely right.
Wizards in space.
Okay. Now, Matthew, what are you thinking? We got.
I actually don't think that line messes up continuity.
No.
For me, I always took it.
I understand that, but when you're watching the movie, you're thinking, "Oh,
okay, yeah, I remember."
It sort of alters the continuity, alters the meaning of it.
It does change it, because you're like, okay, this is the last time they met, and then you just keep going down the series every time they met.
Yeah,
but actually, I enjoyed Dooku in this film. I didn't like his beard design. I never liked his beard design in the whole series. Like, it just looked awful.
Too angular.
I don't know what was wrong. I don't know what was up with it. It was weird in the back too. But anyway, I really liked it. I didn't actually have I have to agree with Nathan. I don't think it did too much to his character. Much like you and Tim talk about on the comics, they kind of picked up the character, used him for a little bit, and put him back right where he started.
Yeah.
So though Dooku never really got a tremendous amount of character development, even in the movies.
Right.
I mean, he's only in Revenge of the Sith for like 5 minutes. So
yeah.
No, but I enjoyed Dooku there. I think having Ventress in there also as another Sith actually added so much to it, because she was one of those characters that you could use and could fail.
Right.
And you didn't have to put it all on Dooku, because if Dooku failed all the time, it would just look ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it kind of kept his dignity a little more.
Well, yeah, it would be like Inspector Gadget's Dr. Claw. I'll get you next time, Gadget. Like, it would get a little like, oh yeah, okay, of course, like. You know what I mean?
A little 66 Batman, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, Steve, Dooku, like, what are you thinking? Like,
they used him how they needed to use him. He doesn't have to become a front and center character for the story they're telling. He needs to be that back piece. He's that interface between the story and Sidious, right?
Right.
So he's really there to keep that connection going. He's the menacing baddie in the background, and he's pulling the strings and doing the stuff, and his play with Jabba, the whole kind of double crossing plot, helps convey how sinister they are and the extent they'll go messing with these major forces in the galaxy, the Hutt cartel being one of them, to
that's a good point.
and risking so much in doing that. So he played, he was a plot element for this arc, if you will.
Yeah, no, I agreed. If how about we got all these characters, we introduced Snips, we got all this other stuff. Would you think this movie maybe would have been better served if Netflix was more of a platform, or if streaming services was more of a thing 11 years ago? Like, would you think it would have seen the theater, or would have been, here's this movie and like straight to video on demand? You mean like instead of a theatrical release?
I wonder if it would have had the impact in that case.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Right? Because I wonder how big of an impact, the Disney Plus shows are going to have. Because shows are released on these streaming platforms now, and I have a feeling Disney Plus is going to do the weekly episode release. But especially the Netflix model where they dump a season at a time for binging, it's talked about for a week and then everybody forgets about it. They're on to the next thing. I wonder if that would have been a similar situation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, obviously, because it's kind of one of these things, and whenever, even I was asked earlier, it's like, you guys going to do a retrospective on the Clone Wars movie? I'm like, yes, of course. It's a theatrical release. It had its, and because of that, it had its moment, right? Like, just like, so I'm just thinking, if now we're only 11 years forward, like, that's what I'm thinking. It's like, if they had Netflix, they would have just, drop it on Netflix. Here's the pilot movie long pilot, like a movie length pilot, and then continued from there. Like, it just seems, I don't know if it would have been better served, or like you said, Nathan, maybe it would have been just flash in the pan and then gone. Matt, I know you were a lot younger when it came out, so I know Netflix has always kind of probably just been a thing. You've always known.
yeah, it has been. Yeah. I don't know. If Netflix was more popular, those 11 years ago, I definitely would have think there would have been probably something similar to that.
Right.
But nowadays, I think even animated movies are getting a little more time in the sun, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, very big release. So I don't actually think, that's tough. I'm going to say probably it still gets released theatrically.
Yeah.
Just because I think it was back then, Star Wars was kind of one of those things that was just still unstoppable.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Like you said, it made a lot of money.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And well, Steve, I'm going to throw it the other way. I'm going to say, okay, if this came out, you mean in, let's say, 86, would it have had like a blockbuster appeal? Like, I know it wouldn't have met up with, like, after everybody's just finishing seeing Jedi, but because it's one of those borderline Netflix shows, and it came out a decade early, or even 5 years early before the big rush to Netflix. So maybe back in the 80s, would have been different? Would have been
Well, this is interesting because back in the 80s, that was your only platform, was theatrical release.
Yes.
So that was it. Now,
and we also didn't have the you'd almost have to bring your kid.
Oh, sure.
Or bring your younger brother because it was a cartoon.
Oh, that's right. You needed them to justify why you as an adult were there.
Yes.
So no one looked at you weird.
Yeah. Well, and of course, there's lots of it's in the middle of the prequel, so it wouldn't make any sense at all. I'm just trying to get a feel as far as the release of this movie, because again, we get asked, is it part of the Star Wars movies? And it was a theatrical release, so of course it is. But there's always an asterisk for some reason. And I'm just wondering how the asterisk would have played in today's date and, 30 years ago. So it just doesn't seem like it might have been a blockbuster. I don't know.
It's so hard to compare because it was such a different world back then. And you didn't see major franchises coming out with cartoon theatrical releases in the mid 80s. It just, I mean, even Transformers, as big as it was, didn't get, their big movie until late 80s, maybe early 90s.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But so even for the time it was released, I'm going to pull it back. And this was the time when George was still running everything. So it wasn't the Disney era. So even if Netflix was as big, you have to think about the business aspect. I always kind of go and think, okay, well, if we invest this money in, if we invest this $8.5 million, where are we going to get the best return? Is it going to be on Netflix where we're taking, I don't know how Netflix deals are written, but certainly in doing a theatrical release, you're probably getting a bigger chunk of the money.
Of course.
So, and earning 68 million off of 8.5, that's a wonderful return. I don't care how much you market it.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, exactly.
Not to mention the merchandise.
Oh my God, the merchandising.
Merchandising.
Yogurt. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, as long as we're playing hypotheticals, let's just consider that there is a different world where this movie was a Pixar movie.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Actually,
yes, please.
wow. Yeah. That would be good. And also too, and again, we're talking like eras. I know it's all hypotheticals, but if you're looking at eyeballs, like if I had a small project and I wanted to put it either on like Crave TV up here in Canada or Netflix, like I want it on Netflix because of the global audience, right? You want it to reach more people. And again, at the time, considering in 2008, I know it's not generations ago, but it was still in as far as how we enjoy our movie going experience. It is completely different landscape now. Yeah, I think the theatrical release was probably the best bet, considering, instead of having it sitting on the shelf at Blockbuster, which would have happened. Like
for those that still remember what Blockbuster was.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to spin it around the table again, and then we're going to jump off hypotheticals. Highlights, favorite parts of the movie. Nathan, what do you take away from this? I know, again, we're not going to have the Darth Vader, I'm your father reveal, but what are you thinking, Nathan?
I've got a few. One of my favorite parts is, and I mean, this is purely to make it sort of that Cartoon Network, give it that Cartoon Network feeling, but it's the music when they're scaling the cliff,
right?
You're in a Star Wars movie and they start climbing this cliff, and all of a sudden the Batman Beyond theme starts playing. It's so over the top and ridiculous, but I mean, you see what they were going for, and I appreciate it for that. But it's more amusing to me than anything. But I also liked R2-D2 wearing a papoose. I mean, I never thought I would see that. Piers Morgan would call it emasculating.
Yes, of course.
But one thing I did like was how angry Anakin was about having to go back to Tatooine.
Yes.
He says, I never would have to go back to this dust ball or whatever it is. He says something along those lines. And it made me think, we see how angry Vader is at the beginning of A New Hope.
Yep.
And, since Rogue One came out, we're like, oh, he's pissed off because, he went through so much and they got away and he's just angry about that.
Yeah.
But I think he's asangry because he never wanted to lay eyes on Tatooine again.
Well, yeah, it's got sand,
right?
It gets everywhere.
Yeah. So I never considered it like that. Like the mere fact that he's in Tatooine space just probably is getting under his very crispy skin.
Yeah, I absolutely. I agree with you. It's done for me. The movie, there are stuff like for me. I'm sure, Steve, I don't know if you'd appreciate it, but the saber fighting in the animation was something completely new. I'll let you go on about that in a second. The fact that they kind of did a wink to Anakin and Padme's relationship, they didn't make a meal of it. It was just there, and we knew it, and we saw it, them seeing each other in hologram and kind of having to be a little more composed. again, the animation style was pretty cool. It was Snips again. I was like, okay, but I've learned to love her, and eventually, Stinky was a little off-putting. But then again, I was 35 when it came out, or you know what I mean? Like, come on. So, some things I took with a grain of salt, and some things I said, okay, yeah, you're watching an animated film. But yeah, I thought it was. There's tons of spots I really really loved about this movie. Matt, what are your what's your favorite parts about this?
I'd have to say my favorite parts about this film are the clones. Coming off of this film, it came out in 2008, so I was always playing the Star Wars Battlefront 2 game,
right?
And that just made me fall in love with the clones. So just to see them in action and seeing all that just really kind of gritty action was really fascinating. And I love seeing them kind of work more as a unit together. I also love that we actually have Anakin meeting Jabba the Hutt.
Yes.
I don't think he ever had. So I thought it was kind of neat to see that parallel between when Luke would stand before Jabba. Very kind of an interesting thing. I do enjoy the lightsaber fights. Of course, hearing the LAT gunship sound is just always good. So yeah, no, a lot of good stuff in this film. I think my favorite part would have to be the beginning battle on Christophsis. I think that was kind of fascinating. Yeah. All the clones with the cannons, very military. Protect the cannons as Anakin and Ahsoka sneak behind and take that out. That was very cool. I always enjoyed that. I also liked seeing them take on droidicas in that part. So I really enjoyed it. Love it.
Yeah, and let's not forget when they sat down and had refreshment and they ordered to get some liquid.
Yeah. Not one of Kenobi's finest moments.
No, not one of his finest. But then I've had my moments where I've just been able to say liquid, like just refreshment, like.
Well, Kenobi has a drinking problem. It's obvious throughout the series. I mean, he's always drinking.
He is,
getting a drink.
It's true.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Commander Cody and Mopar.
Yeah, Commander Cody and Mopar.
The thing I do like about that part, though, is Grievous refers to him as the negotiator.
Yeah.
In Revenge of the Sith, right? So it kind of sets that precedent of Obi-Wan is one to sit down and negotiate, even if it's, a ploy to distract, right?
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
And that, if you understand kind of the subclasses of Jedi, Obi-Wan is a consular, which by definition is more of a diplomat. He's more likely to sit down and figure it out rather than draw a saber. So it completely fits the part.
Oh, Steve dropping knowledge.
Well, I've done some research.
Okay. Well, let's expand on that, Steve. Then
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
So and again, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the animation with the saber fighting.
Well, so I might be that guy that likes to analyze those things.
Of course,
being as for those who aren't fully aware, I help run a lightsaber combat school, so. We get kind of deep into this. So the one thing I really noticed this time around, I watched it this afternoon because of homework. Ahsoka in this show, which is different from the rest of the series, and I'm going to have to start watching the series all over again to figure out where it changes. But she usually carries 2 lightsabers. But in this movie, she only carries 1 green lightsaber.
Right.
Now, analyzing her fighting style, she uses what we call Form 5, a variant called Xian, which is when she holds it in a reverse grip. And you see her do that throughout the entire Clone Wars TV series. She's always using that reverse grip. And so looking at other notable people who use that same style, well, if you understand Ahsoka, she was brought into the Jedi Order by none other than Plo Koon, who is also very proficient in Xian. So you start seeing some of these little connected dots that fill in, just some backstory, some universe building. So I really appreciated kind of that detail that they put in there that nobody would notice. But for, the 3 of us people on the planet that do are just like, dude, that's so awesome.
Well, yeah, because you'd have to be into saber fighting or I don't know what the exact terminology is, or even fencing or sword fighting or whatever. And also too love Star Wars. You know what I mean? So And you
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Filoni would know. Filoni would know that too because Plo Koon's his favorite character.
Yes.
So
really,
he would have probably caught onto that right away. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And
Steve, that's fantastic.
I do my homework.
And who the guy that voiced Obi-Wan, Taylor.
James Arnold Taylor.
James Arnold Taylor, yes.
Chat.
He also was able to create. He's very proud of Plo Koon because he created. That was his character.
Yep.
You know, all the other characters he did on the show, he was watching the movies, copying,
mimicking.
Yeah, exactly, impersonating. But that was the one where he could be like, "No, that's mine."
Right.
Started, and he's the only one to do it. So, and okay. So also, Steve, with the sword play, I know, I don't know tons about it, but I know whenever you see somebody in a saber fight, it's not just tapping swords, and that must drive you insane because it's like, no, you're not aiming to tap the other person's sword. You're aiming to what they do in Star Wars, hack off a limb,
inflict damage, shall we say?
Inflict damage, exactly.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
like. If you and your little brother or you mean a little sister ever on Christmas morning with all the wrapping paper tubes and had a sword fight, you just stand there and snap the tubes against each other. It's like, no, that's not how it goes. If you were actually in a sword fight, you would be dead very quickly. I'm quite sure.
Yes.
Because if your objective was to tap the other person's sword, well,
that's easy.
You know, so
very
it is.
Maul v. Obi-Wan in the
in New Hope.
Sons?
Yes.
No, Darth Maul fighting Obi-Wan in the later Rebel series.
Right.
In Twin Sons, yeah. That was the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, Twin Sons. Yep.
No, that's exactly how it is in real life when you're trying to, score a point. But, even from our point of view, they're doing it to look cool on screen. It's stage combat. So that's fine. That's great. But when they add in those real life elements where there are, these good reasons for doing something this way or that way, and Ahsoka using her style in the way she does, even in the reverse grip, which is a very advanced style, by the way, she's doing it. That style was developed to deflect blaster bolts back at their origin. There's another form 3, Cereso, which Obi-Wan is a master of, that was developed to deflect bolts, not necessarily to redirect them to the origin. And so later on, Xi'an was developed to redirect back to the origin. So there's an interesting dichotomy there between Obi-Wan style and Ahsoka style.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And then to make it even more interesting, Anakin's style is called Jumso, which is the powerful variant of Form 5, which is just kind of another version of Ahsoka's style.
And Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan in New Hope, what style was that? Just
that was
Alec Guinness style.
That's Mercy Hill's retirement home form.
I gotta ask you, Steve.
Please.
I gotta ask you. So in the when we see the prequel trilogy and we have Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting, is their form consistent throughout the show and the movies?
No.
Or do they jump around?
What they show in the movies is all choreography, and they've even said what they did in the movies is certainly in the OT and even in the PT. It was pure stage combat. They made it up. They weren't trying to, at that point, they were not trying to adhere to any standards of this is how so-and-so fights and so-and-so fights. That was all just made up by Nick What's-His-Face. And, them sitting there just spinning their sabers back and forth just kind of kills a little part of my soul.
Would any of that have existed before episode 1? Like, would those forms have been developed?
In universe or in, the...
No, in reality.
No, because the lightsaber forms we talk about are adapted. There was I think they first got mentioned in the Star Wars Insider article in 2001. And
so he wouldn't have had anything to go off of anyway.
Yeah, and there it was just lightly touched upon. It was kind of further developed later. You know, there was some more verbiage put around it when the Jedi Path book came out, but it still wasn't fully fleshed out. You really had to, from that, fill in a lot of gaps to make it a real life actual thing.
So what I was, just to steer it back to the Clone Wars movie.
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, and because we have Steve here, so if there's a direct path, if I just from a casual viewer, I know nothing about sword fighting other than Christmas morning with the empty tubes. So I see New Hope. I'm like, okay, tap tap tap, and then it gets a little more. It gets more exciting visually, and then the prequels come out, and of course that huge battle is just amazing on screen. Mm-hmm. And then you start seeing Clone Wars, where it's adding, like you said, a little bit more forms of living, and a little bit more thought put into it. Mm-hmm. And then when you get down to Rebels, when Obi-Wan beats Darth Maul, he presents himself just the same way Qui-Gon did.
Yeah.
Darth Maul retaliates, and then Obi-Wan knows he has him, and then he switches it up, and he goes for the death real quick. So I'm assuming that is more exactly the way it would go. If compare it when you watch the flow.
Yep.
So with the Clone Wars, they've actually started something here.
Yep.
With giving a lot more reality, a lot more realism to the actual saber fights.
No, you're absolutely right, and the Maul and Obi-Wan fight in Twin Suns, even in the stuff that we practice and we would go to tournaments and whatnot, though, getting a point, or what Obi-Wan and Maul were doing was essentially somebody gets a point, you've inflicted damage, you kill somebody. Those are over in seconds. It's not usually a long drawn out thing unless you're dancing around each other, kind of going, you go first. Who goes first here? You? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then,
you just wouldn't have the energy, right?
Well, yeah. But the other thing that's interesting to know, I'm glad you brought up that scene, because one of the really interesting parts of that scene is when they first stand off against each other. Obi-Wan goes through 3 stances. Mm-hmm. And it really ultimately reflects his own development and progression over time. The first is more of a Qui-Gon style. He holds the hilt off to the side. Then mm-hmm. he holds it in front of him, and then he puts his 2 fingers out there in an older Obi-Wan style. Yeah. It shows his evolution of his own training over time in that 3-second clip. It's just phenomenal.
And at the same time too, it's causing Maul to tip his hand.
Oh yeah,
because he knows how he would react to these different poses.
Yeah, he already knows why Maul is there, and he already has the upper hand.
He's done, yeah.
He has the high ground.
Man, who knew Star Wars was so cool?
Now I wonder, would you say the Force has anything to do with it, because it allows the Jedi or the Sith to see things before they're happening? So would that influence how they would fight, and maybe make it a longer conflict? And in that case, it was just that Obi-Wan was so much superior in the Force than Maul was at that moment, that just Obi-Wan could.
Okay, well let me reword that just a slight little bit, Steve. If you were when Obi-Wan and Anakin went at it in Revenge of the Sith, is it because of their split second prior knowledge to where the other person was going? Maybe that could explain some of the lightsaber tappy.
So everyone has kind of a different affinity with the Force. So some people have more of that connection to predictive behavior. They can see things coming faster. Other people are better, starfighter pilots. Other people are better at this. Other people are better at that. Just everybody has their own special connection to the Force. So Obi-Wan was a master of his saber form. He was, the master of Shirasu. So being good in that dueling form, he's got to have that affinity for that 3 millisecond advantage of knowing what's coming next. Maul, on the other hand, not so much that way. He's very acrobatic and he's very powerful, but you've never really seen him have that predictive advantage too much. Because when he does fight, He's very emotional, and that takes over from the peace and the calm where you can listen to the Force and see, maybe 3 milliseconds ahead. So Maul, especially at that point, he's just out of his mind.
Yes, exactly. Well, this is awesome.
And Obi-Wan knows that Maul is always the aggressor. But I also want to point out that, people speculate all the time about whether Vader's midichlorian count went down after he lost all his limbs, but nobody talks about whether Maul's midichlorian count went down when he lost his lower half.
Well, maybe his testosterone a little bit, but other than that. There's a few counts that might be down. As
Kenobi!
He was reaching those high notes after that. That's true.
He was, yes. Okay, well, let's steer this back to the Clone Wars movie. And again, I know we went off on a little tangent, but we have Steve here, so it was
glorious.
Yeah, it's an excellent opportunity to pick your brains. Okay, so just to almost end it up here, we have the Tartakovsky Clone Wars that came out.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here we go. I'll let you start then, Steve. This was a little thing that came out prior to the Clone Wars. It was a Clone Wars. It's canon. It's not canon. Did it influence you watching this, starting watching this movie in this series, or what are your thoughts?
Did it influence me?
Like you know what I mean? Like because it did come out beforehand, right?
But
so
I didn't see it until years later.
Oh, okay.
So again, I had no idea. So when I did find out about it, I'm like, oh, hello there. What's this? Oh, I must watch.
Yeah, what's this thing? Yeah. New Star Wars.
I know. So what I have been really interested in the last couple months, truth be told, is kind of doing the compare and contrast between Tartakovsky Clone Wars and, as I mangled it, the Filoni Clone Wars.
Filoni. Yes. Because we do get the introduction of Ventress, and it's not like this isn't Clone Wars movie wasn't the birth of a lot of these.
Yeah,
these
and so
characters.
It's interesting seeing some of the mini arcs within Tartakovsky, or some of the characters, or some of the elements Filoni just picked up and used. So
yeah, Rex
was fantastic. The ARC troopers. You've got Grievous. Grievous, I guess, was already introduced, but really expanded upon it and gave him a reason why he has wheezy breathing. Thank you, Mace Windu.
Yep.
And all sorts of little things. Even the battle on Mon Cala ended up being, an arc that Filoni picked up and tweaked a little bit, but reused. So Tartakovsky ended up, interestingly enough, being kind of a base for the future Filoni Clone Wars.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at, to tie into the Clone Wars movie. Like this is your influence right here. I mean, this is something. Nathan, were you aware of this other thing going on at the time, or?
I saw the entire Tartakovsky Clone Wars before I saw Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, fantastic!
So I would say that influenced my viewing of Revenge of the Sith more than it influenced my viewing of this movie. Or the rest of the series. Like you said, the whole kidnapping of the Chancellor on Coruscant, and the origin of Grievous's cough and that kind of thing, and the introduction of Grievous itself. I mean, everybody knows how terrifying Grievous is in that series. So it was a really cool introduction to those new characters. One of my favorite characters from that series is Dirge. The bounty hunter,
right?
That's hired by the Separatists on what is he defending the banking clan, and he's leading a bunch of the IG droids on speeder bikes. I mean, it's so cool
with lances.
With lances. Yeah, well, and that's the first time we see Obi-Wan's clone armor, I think, too, right?
Yeah.
So it's also the origin of that.
And Ventress, right?
Yep.
And actually, I want to say that Ventress had shown up in the comics before even the Tartakovsky series.
Okay.
But she definitely showed up in the comics. She definitely showed up in the comics after. But it's interesting that originally Cad Bane was going to be Dirge,
right?
And it got changed, obviously, at some point in the process. But I really wish Dirge had shown up in this series, and I think he would have been like really cool to have in this movie. Actually, thinking about it, even like I don't know, as someone that Ventress was ordering around, like I think that would have been really cool.
Yeah.
But anyway,
no. So yeah, but that's why I brought it up in the first. And I'm glad you. It's rare to hear somebody actually seeing it in order of release, and so,
yeah.
Matt, did you when did you stumble upon that? What I basically want to know is, did it influence you watching the Clone Wars movie, or did you just fall upon it later?
Actually, I don't remember. I've never actually seen all of the. I'm not going to pronounce his name. I can't.
Tartakovsky.
Tartakovsky. There we go. Okay. I haven't seen all of the Tartakovsky Clone Wars. I've seen clips and stuff. I don't remember when I saw it. I don't think it had much of an influence on. I definitely didn't see it before Revenge of the Sith, so I don't think it had much of an influence on my viewing of this film.
Right. Okay, so well, here we go. We're nearing the end of our hour, and again, this is obviously not a beat for beat recap of the Clone Wars movie. This is just a general discussion amongst friends. So I'm going to throw it around the table again. I'm going to start with Nathan. Final thoughts on the Clone Wars movie.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's the best arc for this series to be gone on. I definitely think there are better stories in the series that they could have picked episodes out of to make the movie. The animation style is gorgeous, and they really, like I said, put more resources into the look of the animation in the movie, even beyond where they were in the TV episodes that were being released around the same time. I will say it's fun to go back and watch this and watch the earlier episodes of the TV series and then contrast them with the later ones. I mean, like in this movie, we were talking about how cool the opening battle on Christophsis is, but a lot of those shots are like panning shots and steady cam shots almost, and there's a lot of shaking and stuff, and there's a lot of the characters are moving a lot more. But like when you've got like a tracking shot, like there's an early tracking shot, I think it's of Anakin or Obi-Wan, one of them, on the bridge of a Republic cruiser, and it's just a tracking shot watching them walk, and it's like an episode of Reboot. It's so stiff and clunky and terrible, and it really helps when they can hide a lot of that clunkiness when they have the camera moving, or they have, you know, a lot of characters moving at once or moving more dynamically. But when they're trying to simulate just walking,
yes,
it's really brutal to watch.
Yeah, the slower the action, the harder it is to make it.
Yeah, hide your mistakes, really. But the actual art style, I mean, it still looks gorgeous, and I think that's why part of why it holds up is that art style that they went with. Yeah. For the movie and the series, obviously, but I mean, it still looks gorgeous. Like I've had it playing while we've been recording on TV, and like it just showed the scene of Padme visiting the Chancellor to find out what's been going on with Anakin and all of them, and like there's this purple orange sunset on Coruscant outside the Chancellor's window, and it's just gorgeous to look at. It's just too bad the animation wasn't at the level that the art was at that time.
And is it weird that Padme is very attractive for an animation?
Well, I mean,
I noticed that. No, yeah,
it's appropriate because Padme is very attractive.
That is true.
But I think the movie is fine. You know, it could have been better. It should have just been 4 episodes of the TV series, but it helped pay for like half the series
for sure,
probably. So, and I will say, we were talking about whether this would have had legs if it had been released on Netflix. Whatever that discussion we had.
Yep.
I will say that I think Lucas would have gone for it anyway, because I think Netflix probably would have been more generous than Cartoon Network was with the budget.
Probably, yes. I would have to agree.
So,
okay, Matt, final thoughts on the Clone Wars movie?
Lot of good. I think this movie has a lot of good, and I think there's a lot of things that you could see where they were pulling a lot from the Star Wars universe and trying to make it into a connected thing. Like the Twilight, for me, always felt like the Falcon, always breaking down on him, or something like that. And it just tried to connect these characters to the Star Wars universe. So I think the action's great, as Nathan touched on. The animation is fantastic. I think seeing the character interactions and the beginning of the characters in this show is, I think, what makes this such an important part of the Star Wars, mythos. I think it's very important to be the spark that began the series. So I think seeing characters like Ahsoka and Ventress and these characters like this, I think it was a great step in a direction that took us to all sorts of different parts of the Star Wars universe, and it was a great base to build upon. And I think for that, I think it's fantastic. And I think just seeing the Clone Wars, I think you kind of touch on it a little bit in Attack of the Clones, and then you touch on it a little bit in Revenge of the Sith. But to actually just kind of say, like, the Jedi were here leading clones into battle, and that's what it looked like. And they were spread across the galaxy, and it was an impossible task. It just really kind of showed, and plus, it showed how awesome the clones were. So
yeah,
I'm all game. This movie is good. It's good. I like it.
Steve, final thoughts.
Well, speaking from the high ground, I've got thoughts that blend both Nathan and Matthew here together. I think to Matthew's point, we have to remember that since May 5th, 1977, we've wanted to know what the Clone Wars were. It was some big deal that never got talked about, and
Steve, you and I.
You have
the world the royal we, okay, the royal we.
Yes, again.
So part of the purpose of this movie was to put a stake in the ground to say, now we're going to tell you. So that it's the beginning of something, and that's fantastic. And it introduced, and it, like to Matthew's point, it laid the foundation for everything else Filoni was about to do. Then to kind of counterpoint with Nathan, what Nathan was saying, it's a pilot. Pilots are never the best of a series. It's where the chemistry is still awkward. It's like a first date. It's a little awkward, it's a little strange. You're a little nervous. You got that funky humor in there. But it was enough to get us all wrapped into it going, okay, show me what you can do next. And that's the point of the pilot, is to get you salivating for more. And it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. And
the chessboard was set.
Yeah. And it worked so much that we're going to get a little bit more of it this year. So I know, and we can't get into that because that is a completely other discussion we can have. My final thoughts on the movie: I thought it serviced the upcoming series very well. Again, animation style was bold, but great. Again, like Steve was saying, it was a little awkward at points, but that's the way it is, and a little feeling stuff out. Some of the voices were a little over the top. That eventually, the voice acting smoothed out a little bit more after, as the series went on. But that's just, it is, again, more feeling out of what you're trying to do. So, great starting point. Again, it was definitely worth my $7 at the time going to see it. Like, I wasn't banging at the gate or the glass and demanding money back.
$7 for a movie ticket. Oh my God.
It might have been a Tuesday. And again, it was one of those, it wasn't a literal blockbuster. We didn't line up to see it. We saw it when we saw it, and we appreciate it.
And it was 11 years ago.
Yes. And we appreciate it for what it is, and we appreciate what it spawned eventually.
Now, Rob, can I bring up, I got one more piece of homework I want to share.
Yeah, okay.
Because you actually just touched on it, talking about, the voice actors and them having to kind of learn their roles and fit in with each other. Going back to the Tartakovsky Clone Wars.
Yes.
there were 5, one of which was a no-brainer. There were 5 voice actors that were carried forward from Tartakovsky to Filoni. One being Tom Kane, who originally did Yoda and carried on to do Yoda and also was the opening and ending narrator. Yeah. You had Mr. James Earl Taylor, who invented, created, and continued DJ O-Dub, as they call him. Corey Burton first did Dooku and carried that forward. Terrence Carson created Windu and carried that into Filoni. And then, of course, the no-brainer was Mr. Anthony Daniels.
Yes, of course.
So, again, interesting. So some of these guys already had their footing, and maybe that helped as well.
For sure, yeah, exactly. Nice. When you go into an assignment, you already had a run at it. Of course, like it's like anything else. God, it's like podcasting. A lot easier to do when you've been doing it for a little while.
Oh yeah. Okay? Never listen to my
You guys make it look easy. I make it look extremely difficult. So again, guys, thanks a lot for joining us. I'm going to once more around the table. If people listening to this want to talk Star Wars or anything else to you guys, where can they find you on social media? This is your time. If you got something to plug, if you got something on YouTube, you got whatever you got going on. Nathan, if somebody wants to hook up with Nathan online and not in the Christian Grindr or Tinder way, or that, whatever, if sure, go ahead. But where can people find you?
You can find me at NAF Roberts on Twitter. That's probably the best place. I'm on Instagram. I think it's NAF Roberts on Instagram too. You can find me in the Tumbling Saber and the Talk Star Wars groups on Facebook, but I'm not on Facebook that much anymore, like a lot of people. But Twitter's probably your best bet.
Excellent. Matthew, where can people find you, and what do you got going on online?
Online. Well, let's see. You can probably catch me on the tweets at Pure Genius Lego. You can hear me ramble on about Snyder and Justice League and stuff like that. And you can also catch my Lego stop motion animations at Pure Genius Lego Stop Motion Studios on YouTube. I just put up a video of Rey fighting Nara.
Oh, nice. Fantastic. And come I recommend definitely check that out on YouTube. It's
thank you.
It's your patience is amazing.
It is time consuming. Actually, that's how I got into podcasting, listening to something while I work.
Excellent. Steve, for the folks that don't know, where can they find you?
Right. So we do a podcast. We do lightsaber school stuff. You can find us on Twitter at SD Sabers Podcast, on Facebook at San Diego Sabers, on the web at sandiegosabers.net, which has a bunch of other links to our social media, including our YouTube. We're doing more YouTube-y stuff this year. Speaking of forms, we're working on a Form 1 training video for people. And once Eric finishes his homework, I can finish that out and get it up there.
Excellent.
And if you're not listening to the San Diego Sabers radio podcast, what are you doing with your life?
Probably.
Get on it.
Get on it.
If they're not listening, they're probably saving some brain cells.
No, they're losing it.
No, if you want to waste brain cells, you can come check out my weekly show, the Roman Podcast. Yeah, definitely not for children.
Great segue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I have to squeeze that in there. So you can find myself. I'm Robert MMcast on Twitter, and again, I do have a weekly show, the Roman Podcast. Not Star Wars, not for kids. It's just lighthearted humor. So if you're in for a laugh, we release every Wednesday, and my good buddy Roman and I have a great time. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, hey, of course, check out all the other shows on the Star Wars Commonwealth Network. They're almost to a point where I can't even list them all right now, but check it out. Go to swcommonwealth.com and you can check out all the good stuff there, and that'll point you in. We have somebody for everybody. If you're an astromech builder, if you're into saber fights, if you're into the 501st, if you're into comics or books or even just general discussion, it's all there. And of course, don't forget, I do TSW comics on this very show with Talk Star Wars with my good buddy Tim from Calgary from the Nerd Room, and we wax poetic about Star Wars comics every couple months, and that's another interesting. If you're into comics and you're into Star Wars, definitely check that out. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on this retrospective. Up next, The Force Awakens. We're in the So again, thank you, gentlemen, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.